The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight.
So, welcome to the Weird Tales radio show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome. My name's Charles Christian and you're listening to the Weird Tales Radio Show podcast. This is the show number 48 for the 17th of January. With me is Janie, except unfortunately Janie has got a very sore throat from a cold and cough she caught over the New Year period, so can't say anything. Isn't that right, Janie? Yes, I thought so. Oh, we'll have more from Janie later. Time for the first story. Now, the 17th of January is better known as Old Twelfth Night or Old Twelvey. So what's all that about? Because surely Twelfth Night is on the 6th of January, which is when most people celebrate it. Well, not quite, because back when we moved from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar, this was a calendar revision that began in the 16th century to take account of the fact that the number of minutes in the day wasn't quite equal, and it meant that over a course of centuries we were starting to get the leap year effect was putting several days askew with the dating of Easter. I know it's all very confusing, and I've never yet worked out how Easter is calculated. It's all to do with the spring equinox. But anyway, it was decided to move the calendars forward. However, not everybody wanted to do that, and that included the Great Britain, as we were then called in those days, and its colonies. That's you, North America, United States of America, and Canada I'm talking about. Yep, you were the colonies. And it wasn't until 1752 that we decided to catch up with the rest of the world and synchronise our calendars. However, because of the way the Gregorian calendar works in relation to the Julian calendar, it's meant that there was an 11-day discrepancy. So basically, an Act of Parliament was passed, which meant that people went to bed on Wednesday the 2nd of September 1752 and woke up the next day on Thursday the 14th of September. This, not surprisingly, led to rioters demanding that we should be given back our 11 days. One of the consequences of this is that some people still refer to the old dates, taking account of the 10-11 day discrepancy in the calendar, which is why we have Old Twelfth Night still being celebrated on the 17th of January, along with presumably New Twelfth Night on the 6th of January. And just in case you were thinking, well, isn't all that to do with Christmas and Christmas is over? Not quite, because we used to have Candlemas, which is the 2nd of February, as the end of the Christmas festive season. So plenty more to go. But let's have a look at something else to do with the calendar, and that is the month, January. Quoting here, sorry for the rattling of the paper here, it's a note written by Richard Verstegen in 1673 in a booklet he wrote called Restitution of Decayed Intelligence in Antiquities. And he says, the month which we now call January, our Saxon ancestors called Wolfmanat. In other words, wolf month, because people were more likely to be eaten by wolves in January than at any other season of the year, because of the extremity of the cold and snow, and the ravenous creatures could not find anything else to eat. So Bad times, wolves. But when did wolves die out in the UK? I know you have them in North America, and there have been talks about reintroducing them in the Scottish Highlands. Well, let's have a look at the story so far. In England, that's the southern bit, they died out round about the year 1510, during the reign of King Henry VII. The last wolves in Wales, one was killed in a place called Coed dau Bladow, and apologies for the wrong pronunciation for any Welsh people. It's in Snowdonia and it actually means Wood of the Wolves. And that was in the early decades of the 16th century. So again, pretty much the same time as they died off in England. Over in Ireland, the last wolf was killed in County Carlow, Leinster in 1786. And up in Scotland, there's a lovely story here, that the last one was killed in Morayshire in the Darnaway Forest in 1743. The story goes that a legendary deerstalker called McQueen of Pal a Cochran was called in by the Laird of Macintosh, a local lord, to help track a black beast that had attacked and killed 2 children. They thought it was a wolf. A gathering of the men, including the laird, awaited, but McQueen hadn't turned up. Hours passed, and later the following morning, McQueen did finally march in. People demanded, "Where have you been? What have you been causing this delay?" And McQueen responded by throwing the bloody severed head of a black wolf into the centre of the gathering. Which I think we can successfully say McQueen of Pal Cochran is our award winner for our show for cool comment made by old historical guy. Like that. Marching in, tossing the head into the middle. Something like in a movie. So that's it. We're in Wolf Month, but if you're in the UK, you haven't really had to worry about any wolves for at least the last 200 years. When you get to my age, you find that at Christmas it's often better to just go and treat yourself rather than wait to see what people send you, because it's just socks. Socks, and more socks. So, what did I treat myself to? Well, I got myself a new UK edition Blu-ray version of the movie Night of the Demon. This is the 1957 movie that starred Dana Andrews. For those of you in the US, it was known as Curse of the Demon, and it is a movie adaptation of the M.R. James classic, The Casting of the Runes. Somewhere along the way, I also picked up this little tin of quiz cards. It's called Incredible Myths and Mysteries Quiz. And it's a quiz testing yourself on the greatest myths from around the world. So let's have some of those questions for you now. See if you can guess the answers. What did Abu Hussein hang his head in shame and go into exile for, according to the tales of the Arabian Nights? I know, you're wondering. I don't remember that one, you're thinking. No, neither do I. Apparently he farted at his wedding banquet. What is the only day of the week to retain its Roman origins? This is strictly for English-speaking people. And the answer is Saturday, which is named after Saturn, the god Saturn. Obviously, if you're French, then you know it's different, because Wednesday is Mercury, which comes after Mercury, another Roman god. Here's another one, really into the realms of urban myths, and we've got plenty of urban myths for you in this show. How much of his ear did Van Gogh actually slice off? Because, of course, you're all taught at school that he chopped off his ear. Actually, it was just a portion of his left lobe. That actually sounds more like a bad shaving injury. Another question now. Maori people. What do they claim to see in the moon? Apparently, a woman carrying a bucket. According to Japanese folklore, what type of animal lives on the moon? A rabbit. Okay. And now to end on a couple of Arthurian legends. What was the name of King Arthur's horse? It was Lamry, or Lamry, depending whether you put a double L in it. Yep, that's fine. Didn't know that. And then there's this one. What was the name of King Arthur's spear? You know, pointy stick with a nasty blade on the end. It's apparently Ron, as in to do Ron. No, I don't get that either. Got another Christmas story coming up later.
Something wicked this way comes. Weird Harvest Press presents Harvest Hymns, the sweet fruits and twisted roots of folk horror, a 2-volume set of books investigating the music of folk horror, featuring contributions from some of the biggest names in the field: Candia McCormack, Johnny Trunk, Maddie Pryor, Sharon Krause, Jim Jupp and Kemper Norton, to name just a few. Available now via lulu.com. 100% of all Weird Harvest Press profits are donated to wildlife charities.
Welcome, Bough. You have come of your own free will to the appointed place. It is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man.
As I mentioned earlier in the show, we are running a number of Christmas-tide type stories because it's really only Old Twelfth Night, and if you believe in folklore and history, then you know that Christmas used to be celebrated through till Candlemas at the end of January. So this is a tale called The Mistletoe Bride, and it has a local to where our studio is origin, and just a few miles, 8 miles I suppose it is, to the west of where we are, there's a village called Brocktish on the north bank of the River Waveney, and one of the many old and intriguing buildings in the village is Brocktish Hall, which was built in 1634 in an Elizabethan style. This newer building stands next to the moated site of the now long demolished Brocktish Old Hall, and it is the legend associated with the Old Hall that's our focus of attention. This is one of the locations of the tale of the Mistletoe Bride. According to the legend, it was the Christmas season, and the old hall was decorated with boughs of mistletoe and holly, and a party was being held to celebrate the marriage of the lord of the manor's beautiful daughter. At some point during the evening, the bride grew tired of dancing and suggested the guests play hide and seek. Now, knowing the house so well, the bride headed off to an attic room and hid in a large wooden storage chest. Elsewhere in the house, the game of hide-and-seek eventually drew to a close, with everyone discovered except the bride. A search then began of the house, both inside and outside, and it continued with increasing desperation throughout the night and into the following day, but no trace could be found of the bride. Had she met with an accident, or had she had second thoughts about her marriage and run away? Days turned into weeks, turned into months and into years, but no sign was ever found of the missing bride. Her father died of a broken heart, and the groom, depending on which story of the version of the story being told, either goes mad with grief or goes off to war and is killed in a battle. Eventually the old hall is sold, and it is only then the mystery is solved. While clearing out the building, the new owners find an old locked chest in an attic room. They break it open, and within they find a mouldering skeleton, still clad in the tattered remnants of a bridal gown, with a gold wedding ring upon a bony finger. The poor bride had hidden the chest, but then found herself entombed alive when the lock snapped shut. Now, along with Brockdish Old Hall, Shapwick in Somerset, Bramshill House in Hampshire, and Marwell Old Hall in Hampshire, also in Hampshire, all claim to be genuine locations of the real Mistletoe Bride. Which rather prompts the question, were games of hide and seek particularly dangerous in the late medieval times? Now, while it is possible these legends are based on actual incidents, the stories are all so similar that a more likely explanation is this is a form of what we now call an urban myth, based upon misinterpreted, misreported, or misunderstood historical events. These include the discovery of human bones in unexpected places, a common problem where a house has been built over an old monastic site and probably built over an old graveyard, cryptic inscriptions on tombstones. For example, at Shapwick, there's a grave upon which this says, "The local heiress died in 1681, taken away by a sudden and untimely fate at the very time of the marriage celebrations." And there's also the existence of the actual chest in which the bride is said to have died, both at Marwell and Bramshill, although both of these chests have since been lost. And it's worth noting, however, that large chests were once standard pieces of domestic storage, and rambling country houses might contain many old bridal chests, complete with the bride's initials and date of her wedding. But this was because the bride's new clothing and linen, which accompanied with her when she moved into a new home, it was carried in one of these special large chests. Finally, it's worth noting that at the time of these stories, where various old houses and halls were claiming they were the location of the events in the tale of the Mistletoe Bride, a character called Thomas Bailey produced a fairly melodramatic song called The Mistletoe Bough. It came out in the first quarter of the 19th century. And it very much echoes the entire story that is now told as the legend at various houses. So, was this art imitating life, or life imitating art? I'll leave you to decide that one. However, we have a special Weird Tales radio show, a special recording here. It's Andy Brown singing the lyrics and accompanying himself on a keyboard with a version of Bailey's The Mistletoe Bough. Enjoy it. And if you're listening YouTube, I know you get very snotty about people playing music on podcasts, but this is our own recording. Thank you very much. Weird Tales special. Enjoy.
The mistletoe hung in the castle hall, the holly branch shone on the old oak wall, and the baron's retainers were blithe and gay, and keeping the Christmas holiday. The baron beheld with a father's pride his beautiful child, young Lovell's bride, while she with her bright eyes seemed to be the star of the goodly company. Oh, the mistletoe bough, oh, the mistletoe bough. I'm weary of dancing now, she cried. Here tarry a moment, I'll hide, and Lovell, be sure thou'rt the first to trace the clue to my secret hiding place. Away she ran, and her friends began each tower to search, each nook to scan, and young Lovell cried, where dost thou hide? I'm lonely without thee, my own dear bride. Oh, the mistletoe bough. Oh, the mistletoe bough. They sought her that night and they sought her next day. They sought her in vain till a week passed away. In the highest, the lowest, the loneliest spot, young Lovell sought wildly but found her not. Then years flew by and their grief at last was told as a sorrowful tale of the past. And when Lovell appeared, the children cried, "See, the old man weeps for his fairy bride." Oh, the mistletoe bough. Oh, the mistletoe bough. At length an old chest that had long lain hid was found in the castle. They raised the lid, and a skeleton form lay mouldering there in the bridal wreath of that lady fair. Oh, sad was her fate in sportive jest. She hid from her lord in the old oak chest. It closed with a spring, and her bridal bloom lay withering there in a living tomb. Oh, the mistletoe bough. Oh, the mistletoe bough.
Time for another Christmas present. I also treated myself to a copy of Green Men and White Swans, the Folklore of British Pub Names by Dr. Jacqueline Simpson. Jacqueline Simpson is a stalwart of the UK folklore academic community. Among other things, she's been the president of the Folklore Society. She is also the author of A Dictionary of English Folklore with Steve Roud, and also the Folklore of Discworld, which came out in 2008 with the late Terry Pratchett. Anyway, this particular one, I was intrigued by a story about a pub name called the Brazen Head. Brazen as in brass. And there are pubs with this name in London and also in Glasgow, probably others as well. And it alludes to a magical artefact which was alleged to have been made by the Franciscan friar in Oxford in the 13th century, a certain Roger Bacon. He was a scientist, philosopher, alchemist, and was generally thought to have been a magician as well. And apparently he and Friar Bough, another Franciscan monk turned scientist turned alchemist, were working to produce a bronze or brazen head which would be able to utter prophecies and impart secret knowledge. It sounds a bit dubious, but Roger Bacon actually hoped it would tell him how to build a wall of brass all around Britain so as to defend us from our enemies. Idea for Donald Trump there. You might try finding a brass head to explain how to build the wall between the US and Mexico. Anyway, the spirits had warned him that he must on no account miss the first message the head would utter, for if it did, it might never speak again. So he and Friar Bough waited for hours and hours, and the time went by and it drifted off into the early hours of the morning, and he could no longer keep awake. So he's told his assistant, youth by the name of Miles, to take over the vigil. While Bacon slept and Miles kept guard, the head suddenly spoke. "Time is," said the head. Miles thought this was a stupid message and not worth waking his master up, so he ignored it. A little later, the head said, "Time was." But once again, Miles ignored it. And finally, the head said, "Time is past," burst into flames and destroyed itself. So there you are. Next time you're in a pub called the Brazen Head, now you know where the origins came from. And I say that's in Jacqueline Simpson's Green Men and White Swans, the folklore of British pub names. And we'll be delving into that, I'm sure, over the weeks and months to come.
If you want to grow your business, save time using the latest tech, and look great online, Weird Appeal Digital can help. We have a free, yes, that's free download listing 40 digital tools, apps and resources to help you grow your brand, promote your project, generate leads and reach your audience. Just go to www.appeal.digital/weirdtales for smart, effective digital design, and your free download. Go to www.appeal.digital/weirdtales.
Here's an interesting story that cropped up on BBC News Northern Ireland over the New Year period. As you know, when we run our little practical magic spells on here, one of the ingredients that often crops up is graveyard dirt. Does it have a magical, mystical context? Well, could well do. There's an ancient folk remedy in a churchyard in Bough in County Fermanagh in Northern Ireland, which says the soil from the graveyard can cure ailments. And interestingly, a microbiologist called Dr. Jerry Quinn recently took some samples to see if there was any scientific basis for the legend of the cures, and he found that the soil contains a unique strain of Streptomyces, a microorganism used to produce antibiotics. The survey found that it was able to kill the top 3 pathogens, that's organisms that cause disease, identified by the World Health Organization as a threat to human health. Dr. Quinn here being quoted, "When we brought the soil back to the laboratory, we found a new species of Streptomyces that had never been discovered before, and it contained many antibiotics, and some of these antibiotics actually kill some multi-resistant pathogens." Originally I was surprised, as it was a folk remedy and there seemed to be a lot of superstition around it, but in the back of my head I realised that there's always something behind these traditions, or they wouldn't have gone on for so long. Dr. Quinn is part of an international team of researchers trying to find new antibiotics because one of the problems, as we know, is many diseases are now no longer being able to cured by antibiotics because of overexposure. And adding to the story, we have local historian Frank McHugh, member of the Bough Heritage Group. And he said little has been written about the Bough cure, but the tradition dates back to at least the Reverend James McCurr, who was the parish priest in 1803. He goes on to say, McHugh, "He was obviously had a facility to cure people, and people must have thought very highly of him. What he said was, after I die, the clay that covers me will cure anything that I cured when I was with you." Anyway, the tradition that continues to this day is that people visit the churchyard from far and wide to take home some of the soil. They put the soil wrapped in cloth underneath their pillow and then sleep on it. Frank McHugh, the local historian, says, although it's not officially sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Church, part of the cure does involve saying prayers, and the soil must be returned. So you will get today people who absolutely swear by it, and it's become part of the folk tradition. And you often hear people saying family members way back were cured by it. McHugh goes on to say, "I suppose I'm a little bit sceptical, and that's why I think Jerry McQuinn's work is really interesting, because it really does show the antibiotic properties of limestone clay, and clearly it works. But how, I'm not sure." The church on that site, the Sacred Heart Church, has been there used for Christian worship for more than 1500 years. But intriguingly, in a nearby field, there are Neolithic stone carvings over 4,000 years old. So we are looking at something where it may not even be dating back to Christian times or even 1803, very relatively recent times. We may be going back to something 4,000 years old that people have realised there's a property in the soil, in the clay of this area that is remedial and can cure certain ailments. Fascinating. Anyway, more research is going on, and the next stage will be some trials and further details. And when we get more news, we'll keep you posted. And that's it. We're out of time. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's collection of stories and tales. But until the next time, it's Charles Christian saying, stay well, stay weird, stay different. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, magic, and folklore. Keep in touch with us online at www.urbanfantasist.com or by email at urbanfantasist.icloud.com or on Twitter at Christian Uncut. Good night. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show.